That was great. Thank you, Sandra. Our next reader is J. Michael Dolan. As a child, Michael Dolan happened upon the iconic I Cannot Forgive by Rudolf Vrba, thus beginning a lifelong interest in the Holocaust. A wanderer for most of his childhood, he's lived a lot of places, some of them exotic, where he combined the education only travel can give with that of the written word to produce a variety of published short stories and articles. Please join me in welcoming Michael Dolan.
Thank you, Becky. Okay. My novel, The Trumpets of Jericho, takes place for the most part in the infamous Nazi extermination complex, Auschwitz Birkenau. In the scene I'll be reading, the prisoner Lee Langfus, a young rabbi, is on his way to the attic of Birkenau's Crematorium 3, where he is part of a work gang whose job it is to process the shorn hair of the dead for shipment to German industry. On his way, he runs into some fellow members of the Sonderkommando, our special squad, those mainly Jewish men and boys forced by the Germans to do the heavy physical labor of the death houses. Okay. It was understandable that so many of the special squad should have turned their faces from God, made to escort an endless parade of the naked and defenseless into gas chambers, then burned them afterward like so many bags of garbage. Most found it hard to retain either their belief in a divine being or, conceding that, their continued respect for him. But as distressing as he found this erosion of their faith, Langfus was careful never to bring religion up. Seeing how he was spared most of the obscenities heaped on them, he didn't feel he had the right to. He didn't shy, however, when they broached the subject themselves, from taking a position that argued on the side of the angels. Upon making his way one morning to Crematorium 3, he ran into the last of Sondersquad 57B, the night shift, returning from work to Block 13. Even in the half-light of dawn, he could see the blood on their clothes. "Well, look here," said one of the group of half a dozen, a short, muscular boy named Menachem, not yet out of his teens. Langfus recognized him from the barracks. "If it isn't the prophet on his way to the mountaintop. How's the view from up there, holy man? Any windows in that attic?" The rest snickered at the sarcasm, which drew a smile from Langfus, too. "Not the part of it I work in, Menachem, which is just as well, wouldn't you say?" "Yes," said the boy, "I suppose it is." "So how'd you sleep last night, Rabbi? Pleasant dreams, I hope?" No dreams, thank God." "That's even better." "Is always better." "Guess I don't have to tell you what we were up all night doing. More women and children than usual, or so it seemed, didn't it, boys?" A few nodded, every face somber again. "I'm so sorry, son," Langfus said, "but what choice did you have?" "God will understand." Menachem leaned to his right and spat. "There's that name again," he said, wiping his mouth with his sleeve. "Refresh my memory, will you, Rabbi? Who the hell is this God you keep mentioning?" Langfus responded as if to a legitimate question. "The one true God of our fathers, the God of Abraham and Moses." "Oh, him," Menachem said. "Yes, I remember him. He went away a while back, didn't he? For good, it looks like, too. But he did leave a message. Want to read it? It's written right here." The boy pulled up his sleeve to reveal the 5-digit tattoo. Well, Langfus looked at it, then back to the unsmiling face above it. Yes, I too bear the Gentiles' blasphemous mark, he said. But I'm afraid you're mistaken if you think God went away. We're hardly the first. Mistaken? Menachem flung his arm wide. Take a look around you, why don't you? Mistaken. Langfus, feeling his pain, wished only to alleviate it. We're hardly, he began again, the first Jews in history God would seem to have abandoned. How many times in the synagogue have I read aloud from the book of Esther, which tells of the Persian Empire's attempt to annihilate its Jews? And what of our 300-year bondage in Egypt? Are the generations of Babylonian exile? On all three occasions, God, to whom the centuries are but seconds, delivered us from the oppressor. Well, he'd better hurry this time, Menachem said, turning with a grin to the others, or he's liable to wake up one day and find no one left to deliver. Far from taking offense, Langfus smiled himself while waiting for the laughter to die down. Tell me, he said finally, gazing at each in turn, don't you consider yourself enemies of the Germans, loathe the very ground they walk on? A murmur of affirmatives. Let us not talk then of God abandoning you, but of you abandoning him. Don't you see what you're doing? Exactly what the SS want you to. To lose one's faith is a kind of death in itself. The Nazis would kill you twice, first your soul, then your body. Before stealing your flesh, they'd rob you of your heritage. That is how enamored of their power they are. They've slain your families, your friends. Would you allow them the victory of murdering your God too? There were a few smirks, but his question went unanswered. God has not deserted us. He has designs beyond our vision. Forget the 300 years of Egypt. Our people have been denied their homeland for almost 2,000 years, scattered to the winds after the Roman legions destroyed Jerusalem. Yet we have not been extinguished. God will not let us be extinguished. He has a plan for us still, a purpose, the particulars of which we're simply unaware. Another boy stepped forward, no older than the first. Rubbish, he said. Menachem is right. We're dying by the thousands every day, the tens of thousands every week. And that at this one camp alone. How can God's purpose for us be served if our race is wiped out? Which is why we won't be wiped out, Langfus said. Again, God won't let us be. Throughout history, my brothers, there have been pharaohs who would exterminate us. As we've managed with God's blessing to survive until now, we will survive this as well, this latest Holocaust. Jewish suffering is not new, but for its brutish technology, Birkenau is not new. The Bible, if you'll recall your Ecclesiastes, is most precise on this point. What has been will be again. What has been done will be done again. There is nothing new under the sun. Does that mean, the new boy sneered, because the Egyptians and Persians and who knows how many others persecuted us, it's all right for the Nazis too? Of course not. Langfus kept his calm. There can never be a justification for the persecution of the blameless. All I'm saying is that just as our forefathers kept the flame of their faith going, their trust in God alive, so must we. And as in the end their descendants were rewarded for that trust, so will ours be. If our fathers enslaved in Egypt had angered God by renouncing their faith, there would have been no Moses, no Exodus, no gift of the land of Canaan. Are we to risk by our short-sightedness denying our children whatever recompense for our suffering God might have in store for them? Children, you say? This from a third Sandra, older than the rest. Which children, Rabbi? The ones I lost the first day here? My two little girls? Or the dozen I carried out of the gas chamber last night? My poor man, Langford said. I too lost a child, along with his mother, but... And why suffering? The man persisted. Why must we Jews always be suffering? We were doing just fine until the Germans came along. Is your God such a sadist that he would make his people bleed before giving them back what he took from them in the first place? Langfus glanced skyward as if searching there for an answer. Excuse me. Perhaps it is God's intention, he said. Perhaps it is not God's intention, he said, to restore the status quo, to make things as they were. Perhaps in his omniscience, his knowledge of the future, he's deemed our situation needful of change, radical change, so that in the end we may prosper as never before. Perhaps only by suffering to the degree we are now can this change come about. How can we know what the future holds? But God does, and maybe in light of it, our present anguish is necessary. This, though, we can know, and summon much hope from. After our fathers fled Egypt, after proving themselves there, and with a couple of lapses in the Sinai, God led them into Canaan, invited them to take the land of milk and honey as their own. Could something similar be awaiting us after the black night of Bir Canal? Provided we remain steadfast and not renege on the covenant God forged with Abraham, might not our agony in the camps be our ticket to a new Canaan? Perhaps even a return to Eretz Israel itself? Langfus paused, expecting this last to be met with jeers. But for the distant shouts of the roll call coming from the Appellplatz, however, all was silence. Encouraged, he plunged ahead. Who can presume to understand God's plan, penetrate his all-knowingness? If, on the other hand, there is no plan, if he has in fact forsaken us, if you are right and I am wrong, allow me now in all humility to beg your forgiveness, for then God will have proved himself a fraud, and I, as his cat's paw, will have done you a great disservice. False hope, as you know, as you've observed it in those walking meekly into the crematoria, can be more destructive than no hope at all. It'd be foolish, however, to give up on him now, at this, the 11th hour. One way or another, it would appear our fate is about to be decided, either at the bloody hands of the Gentile or by the saving hand of God. After 2,000 years of oppression and exile, why chance displeasing him at the last minute? Remember, though protective, he is also a vain God and jealous of our attention. Langfus turned to the last Zonder who'd spoken. Yes, our children are gone, nor is there any bringing them back. Some of us, however, maybe not those of us present, but some are going to have children again. There will be survivors. The SS can't kill us all. It would be a shame, no, a crime, would it not, to deprive those children of their patrimony by incurring God's wrath with our rejection of him. just as it would if the dead were to end up dying for nothing. Afterward, Langfus was philosophical. He hadn't convinced them, but that was never his intention. He wept for the men of the Zonder, especially those of them not yet men, those little more than boys made to wade in the gore of the death house. In deference to their lot, whenever they obliged him to bring religion to the fore, he made it a point to lose neither his solicitude nor poise. By approaching them this way, not as a preacher or a pontificator, but as a friend, he could be forceful yet still come off as supportive, as someone who cared. While seldom changing their minds, this, by bringing their anger and pain into the open, seemed to blunt the cutting edge of both. And that was all he ever really wanted. That, and maybe to make them at least question their apostasy.
Are there any questions, Michael?
You.
Well, how would you sum up, like, what exactly is your book about? What point did you want to make overall?
Well, that's a good one. I can probably just use the back cover of the book to describe that. I think I have it memorized. Trumpets is the first book and only novel devoted in its entirety to one of the more remarkable episodes of Jewish resistance to the Nazis. The defiant 1944 armed uprising at the SS death camp, Auschwitz, and the just as inspiring account of the 4 young female conspirators arrested and tortured by the Gestapo during the investigation that followed. As one of the architects of the rebellion, the 22-year-old Rosa Rabota, arguably the greatest Jewish heroine to come out of the Holocaust, is brought to vivid and long overdue life. In my book, you'll meet her and the rest of the heroes and villains that will both thrill and horrify you at the heights and depths our unpredictable kind is capable of reaching. In Trumpets, I produced a work that I believe will move you as deeply as its subject has me. In conjunction with bringing this epic tale to life, I explore, among other themes, religion and the existence of God. Got some of that in here. The psychology of genocide, friendship and romantic love, sexual and other pathologies, the nature of good and evil, right and wrong. But above all, I show how the most monstrous crime ever committed was in the end, no match for the indomitability, the grandeur of the human spirit. He was sort of the protege, or sort of the right-hand man of one of the Sonderkommando, the head capo of the Sonderkommando, who was probably with Rosa, the main architects of the revolt. Rosa was in charge of the gunpowder smuggling that the rebels needed. She penetrated the cell, penetrated the gunpowder room in the nearby munitions plant where the only females worked, organized a cell there, and was in charge of the smuggling, and all of the gunpowder was delivered to her. She delivered it to the Sonderkommando. Kaminsky, the head capo of the Sonderkommando, was in charge of trying to motivate them and equip them and prepare them for this revolt. It took several years before they were finally able to launch it. And Lee Blankfus was a strange individual. He wouldn't do the Sonderkommando work, although he was in the Sonderkommando, which usually meant a quick bullet to the head. But somehow the Germans let him slip by and do other things. He was never involved in the gas chamber operations or the ovens. He was in the undressing room sometimes, but beyond that, he didn't. And there were certain people that the Germans, very few, just sort of let go under their radar. Kaminsky was one of them. Lankus was another. He was a very holy man. He did a lot of brave things, risked his life in a lot of ways, and eventually paid for it. All of the heroes, by the way, all the people in my book are real. They're historical figures, except for 4 or 5 pretty minor ones. All of them really lived. That's one reason I wanted to write this book. No one knows of their names. No one knows of them. I wanted to change that. Questions? Oh,
Why did you choose the book to be a novel rather than nonfiction?
I was hoping someone would ask that. Because I'm asked that so often that I took the liberty of writing down an answer beforehand. It's an excerpt from the talk I give to different groups. Sneaky, I know. Anyway, I originally conceived Trumpets as nonfiction. But when during my research I got to know the people behind the facts, it didn't take me long to make the leap to historical fiction. I did this after realizing the true power of the story lay in the personalities and courage of those amazing men and women who lived it. And for my book to be the one I wanted it to be, a book that touched the heart as deeply as it informed the mind, I would need to tap into that power. Now, nonfiction definitely has its pluses, is often the best way to tell a story. But there is nothing like the immediacy, the emotion fiction can generate to bring people to life between the covers of a book. And that's the main reason I wrote Trumpets. I just mentioned that. To shine the light of recognition on forgotten heroes. Not for their memory's sake alone, as much as they deserve it, but to show what is possible when men and women refuse, against all odds, to simply curl up and die when confronted by those who wouldn't only rob them of their lives, but all dignity. Theirs was a bravery, a sacrifice that we as a culture forget at our peril, and that unfortunately seems to be again relevant today, given the political climate we live in. Is that?
Sounds great. Thank you very much.
Oh, sure.